All right, good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us for this month's Bloom Business Series webinar. My name is Hannah Beard. I'm the Marketing and Communications Manager with Downtown Inc. And today we're talking about merchant and property owner responsibilities. Today's event was made possible by our presenting sponsor, PNC. Thank you to PNC for your continued support of our 2023 Bloom Business Series. Here's a short video to highlight the commitment of PNC's commitment to our community. So today's topic is understanding merchant versus property owner responsibilities, including property maintenance, signage regulations, and responding with compassion towards the unhoused population and other things to know so that you can be a good neighbor in your community. So let's welcome our panelists. Our first panelist is Kelly Bletchertis. She is the program coordinator with York County Coalition on Homelessness. Kelly has worked with housing initiatives in York County for the past 16 years. Driven by a passion for helping people and service providers, she takes pride in providing the best collaboration opportunities possible in York County to help both service organizations and residents of York achieve their goals of stable housing for all. Our next panelist is Steve Buffington of the City of York. Steve began his career with the city in 1981. After serving 30 years in the fire department and retiring as fire chief, he became the building code official and eventually the deputy director of economic and community development for permits and inspections. Our final panelist is Robin Shearer. She's the co-founder and executive director of Friends and Neighbors of Pennsylvania. Robin has served communities in various roles, including domestic violence and sexual assault crisis intervention, director of youth ministries, coordinated street outreach, volunteer coordinator, and board member for various organizations. Robin's compassion and dedication pushes her to do whatever she can to mobilize resources, to build capacity and encourage collaboration in order to create system change in the community. So thank you to all of our panelists for joining us today. Reminder to those watching, if you have questions for today's panelists during the presentation, please submit them through the Q&A or the chat feature that is along the taskbar at the bottom of the Zoom. And then at the end of the program, we'll address the questions. So we're going to divide our panelist discussion into two parts today. First, we will talk with Robin and Kelly about the ways to be a good neighbor with the various populations that are present in downtown York. And then we'll talk to Steve about approaches to being a good neighbor in regards to merchant and property owner responsibilities. So first, let's talk to Robin and Kelly. So I have a couple questions here for you guys, and I will ping them at one of you, and then if the other wants to chime in, please do so. So first, this one is for both of you. Both of your organizations help our unhoused populations, focusing on relationship building as top priority. So what are ways that you can prioritize these relationships? What are the benefits of putting relationships first with our unhoused population? So Robin, let's start that with you.
Sure. I think keeping in mind that our unhoused population are also community members, I think is the first thing that I always like to say. We're all part of the community. So of course, building relationship with all of us in the community is vital. All of us just happen to have different stability in our housing and in our circumstances. So from my perspective, that is the basis for the collaboration, the relationship component. Kelly, do you have anything you want to add to that?
I think that's true. I mean, I think when someone is part of a community, you see them all the time. If you're out and about in New York, you probably see me walking down the street. You might not have known who I was, but you see me and you recognize that you've seen me before. And that's part of this, right? They are part of our community. You also can't tell someone's housing status by their outward appearance. So there is a lot of assumptions made about what folks' situation is based on how they might look on a certain day. But I think it comes down to this idea that your relationships, whether they're professional, whether they're personal, whether they're just someone that you pass on the street, are so much more rich and so much more fulfilling if you're approaching this from a manner of not only empathy, but compassion. So empathy being just your kindness, right? Like your gateway to being compassionate, understanding that someone isn't like you. That doesn't make them better, worse, or different than you in any true sense. They are still part of your community. They're still one of your neighbors, and treat them as such. If you live in housing and you see your neighbor next door and you wave or you say hello in the morning when you're leaving for work, there's no reason not to do that with someone else that you might see.
Right. And I think to add to that, I think one of the things that I was really reminded of through COVID was just how we need to learn again how to be a community. And let's do it maybe healthier than we did it before. So lately, Kelly and I have been spending a lot of time with downtown business community as a whole. But even just those of us that work together in the unhoused population, we're now doing a lot more with those that are in the medical. So because we all need to work together, but we all need to learn again how to collaborate as a community. And because that is really what makes our community foundation strong, in my opinion.
And it doesn't have to be a big lift. One of the things we hear from our folks that spend time outdoors in New York City, I'm not even going to say they're unhoused or unsheltered, because that is not the case all the time. But we hear that people avoid looking at them, they avoid walking near them, they avoid going anywhere down the street, they'll cross the street to the other side of the sidewalk. People recognize when you're doing that, and it does not make you feel good as a person if someone is avoiding you so blatantly. It doesn't have to be hard. A smile, a nod, walk down the street as you were walking down the street. So it's not a big lift, but I think it's something that everybody can consciously take on and accept and do on a daily basis. And I think it makes us all a stronger, more interconnected community.
So on that, what are some training resources or even equipment that merchants could utilize to respond to or refer an unhoused person appropriately?
Well, one of the things that Kelly and I have been doing is we've been talking with some of the different downtown groups, the Restaurant Association, is putting together what people would like more information on. So that we are creating and doing for people that, and it doesn't have to be, it might be some people from the Restaurant Association and from WECO and just kind of share that information. But one of the things that I always say, you can contact Kelly at the Coalition office. You could contact our agency, Friends and Neighbors. You could contact one of the shelters. So there are a lot of organizations that have information and can help. So that's always a start. Just like a restaurant that might need help with a restaurant's going to contact their organization or who they need to contact. Same with this, if you're just not sure. And I always use Prince Street Cafe as an example. So Christine and her staff, they reach out, they have our information. We have cards there. We stop in there different times. So if Christine has a question, she'll just contact us and say, hey, do you know this person, or this situation's going on? What should I do? What's the good course, that I should take? Because not only is it maybe some of our unsheltered neighbors that come in, but a lot of the different businesses and different partners we work with, their staff are struggling with the same issues that we all may struggle with at times. Housing struggles, food insecurity. So it's really building that relationship between the businesses, the service providers, so that we're stronger together to build that network. So that is always my first suggestion. Contact someone who may be working more with that population or knows the situation may be better than what you do.
I'll just add to that, the training sessions that Robin and I are working on, we're working with Downtown Inc. on those. So I guess my recommendation is to make sure that you're connected to Downtown Inc. Because likely information about these things will go out through their lists and their contacts. But I will say that the things that we've heard from the different community groups for the different merchants tend to align. We've had a lot of requests for a session around how to handle access to your restrooms. We've had questions around what to do if someone is having a mental health struggle or an addiction struggle in or around your business. And we've had some other kind of basic questions about safety, like self-defense type concerns. So I think we're trying to put together a series of options that the merchants can decide to take advantage of. Our goal is not only to educate and train the managers and the owners of the businesses, but to give them resources that are either easily transferred to their staff or something that we can go in and kind of give refreshers to staff to on a regular basis. So we are still working on it. I won't say there's something readily available, but in the interim of that being available, Robin's right. You can always contact us and we will make recommendations. We might have someone we'd recommend you talk to really specifically, depending on what your situation might be. And we also, as far as specifically unsheltered or unhoused individuals go, might be able to provide you with some really direct resources to make sure that they're aware of what's available. Not everyone experiencing housing challenges in York is from York. And we also kind of run into people who just don't know where things are in York City. So being able to direct them is also really important.
So back to what you said about someone experiencing addiction, if a merchant is dealing with an issue related to that or experiencing that, someone managing their medication, how can you guys help? How can your organization step in and assist with that? Robin, let's start with you.
Well, the first thing I'm going to say is this: if it's a 911 issue, contact 911. And sometimes that's just a reminder that people need to hear, because a lot of times that stuff might be skipped and maybe then they'll contact us. So they'll, contact somebody else. But I think a lot of times we've seen, and I know we've talked about it, there is an increase in the number of people that might be dealing with addiction issues, as well as mental health issues. So from my perspective, to be prepared for that and know you're more than likely going to experience that. And that's not with someone that's necessarily unhoused or instably housed. We're seeing that across the board. So I think to just prepare for that. But for us, again, if it's contacting us and someone is struggling with housing as well, it's getting them connected to resources they need, whether if they're ready to go in for treatment or whatever. But I feel like to be proactive and just figure that you're going to see or experience someone that is going to be struggling with that. But again, we're going to connect you to people that we are collaborating with, that we're working with, that that's that relationship part of who we're connected with. But from my point of view, preparation for that and to know what your plan is going to be ahead of time is important.
I'm going to agree with that. I think there actually are a lot of great resources in our community. You don't have to be a drug and alcohol specialist. You don't have to be a mental health specialist to know the basics. And there are models that are available. We'll likely incorporate them into the trainings that we'll offer, but there are mental health first aid options. Anyone who's been through first aid training knows, like, here's the basics to get you through the first issue, and then we'll transfer to someone with more experience. And it's that same idea, right? It's the idea of having a toolkit for all of your staff, anyone that's going to be located at your business, to be able to deal with it in the now and to know what the appropriate contacts are. To Robin's point about 911 calls, to know what to do between when you call 911 and when police respond is really important too. As much as we'd love it to be, they pop up out of nowhere, it takes them time to respond. So having those toolkits are really important. And I would say that on the addiction side, there are also those types of resources. There are different organizations in our community, for example, that provide Narcan training, and they'll teach you how to use it, and they'll provide it to your business so that in the event that you would need to respond, you would be equipped to do so. So I think those are the type of things that are really beneficial. We know, in everyone's world post-COVID, that staffing turnovers happen all the time. So the other thing I would say here is, when you're looking at your policies around your business education and training of your staff, include things like this on a regular rotating basis, because you will have staff leave, you'll have new staff come in. You want to make sure that everyone on your team has the same level of knowledge about what to do in the event of an emergency of this kind.
So let's talk about the restroom conversation. So say a business owner is considering making their restrooms open to the public, not restricted to just their customers. What are some simple best practices? Maybe I shouldn't say simple, but what are some immediate best practices that we could implement and start to open that up more? Kelly, I feel like you're about to say something. Go for it.
I wasn't sure we should start. So we'll probably say the same thing. So I think the foundation of this is what your policy is, and that everyone on your staff knows the policy and responds in the same way. That's really important. There has to be consistency across your staff that are monitoring your restroom space. I think the other piece of that is what your policy is. Allow someone to come in. If you can stop them on the way, they're headed right for the restroom, and you can stop them on the way and say, "Can I help you?" And they say, "Oh, I'm just here to use the restroom." You can remind them that restrooms are preferred for paying customers. You can catch them on the way out and say, "Next time, we'd love you to stop and have a drink or browse the shop," or whatever it might be. You can build things in so that you're not alienating people based on your 5-second evaluation of what their situation might be. You can also look at, if people are regularly coming in and using your restroom and you're allowing that, which we all appreciate, that if someone is abusing that privilege, they're leaving your restroom in a really bad state that takes a lot of cleanup or a lot of extra staff time or plumbing or whatever it might be, that you are able to tell your staff, "We've had, a couple of run-ins, 2 run-ins with this person. They've really done a rough job on our restroom." If you see them come in, you can intercept and say, "I'm sorry, but I cannot allow you to use the restroom because of the state you've left it in the last few times." But all of that goes back to everyone on your team using the exact same methodology and policy. We do honestly greatly appreciate when people have their restrooms open in York City. It's not a secret that York City has no public restrooms outside of the support that the merchants provide downtown. And anytime there's restroom access, that's hugely valuable, not only to folks that are spending the day downtown because it's nice and they're outside, not only to people that are struggling with housing, but people that want to come downtown and just browse the shops. I'm a mom, I have young kids. Restroom access is a real thing when I decide where I'm going to go to do shopping and to spend the day out with my children. So we appreciate that, and we want to see merchants leave those spaces open. You just need to make sure that you're solid on why you're doing it. You're supporting the community, and you understand that there are going to be situations that are going to require a hard or awkward conversation about a particular person perhaps not being allowed to come back and use that facility.
Yeah, I of course agree with everything Kelly said. And one of the things I'm just going to highlight a little bit is when you do have people that are utilizing the public restrooms. And again, I'm going to give a shout out to Prince Street and Christine. You have people that are unhoused. A lot of times, I mean, people don't have anywhere to bathe. So maybe they're doing a sink bath. And sometimes when you're in your clothes a lot, they're dirty and soiled. So sometimes that person leaves the bathroom and it is a little messy, because that's the person is not clean. So there is again, what is your policy? How is your staff trained? Knowing that with the compassion that sometimes that does happen. And are you okay with that? Do you have the ability to go in and clean up after that person leaves? And I know Kelly and I frequent Prince Street a lot. I'm there a lot. So, and I appreciate a lot that what they allow people to do there and utilize their bathrooms. And in some cases, if it's somebody that I'm working with, maybe or no, when they leave the bathroom, I do go in, and if it needs cleaned up, I will clean it up. But again, having the staff trained, but if you have public restrooms, your staff should be trained anyway to keep an eye on them, especially with the rise in the addiction that we're seeing. Whether that person's unhoused or not. And that means, again, having adequate staff that is going to be able to, hey, that person went in there, it's been like 15 minutes. Has anyone seen them come out? I mean, there's also, that component as well.
So on that, we talked about the rise in addiction. Are there other trends that you're noticing with specifically the unhoused population, or just these different groups in York City? So whether it's housing, mental health, healthcare,
Right.
In general, how do we address those specific trends and any issues that surround them?
What we're seeing on our side, we're seeing a lot of people from the unhoused side, a lot of people that have never been unhoused before. This is a whole new thing for them. A lot of them are younger. A lot of them are older. And so they're going to frequent somewhere that they're going to feel safe, maybe during the day, downtown business, downtown area where there's people around, and they are not even sure what to do, let alone what services are available. But there's a lot of fear there. So from the unhoused side, we're seeing that some more families as well. I think that to me is my biggest concern. Because of that, we're seeing people with physical disabilities that are unable to really get around, might have a wheelchair, a walker, just really not be able to get around well. I think that's from my perspective, from the unhoused, the side of the community that we're talking about, that our group that we're seeing, I think, across the board throughout the county.
Yeah, I'm going to echo that. And I think that's not just in those that are unhoused. I think we're seeing just more overall vulnerable folks that have more physical or behavioral challenges. And those are the folks that are having the hardest time, honestly, finding the resources they need long-term, finding affordable housing that they can stay in. They often are on a fixed income, and being on fixed income in this housing market is really hard. So I think I'm going to echo everything Robin said. I don't think we're seeing anything too much outside of that. The only other thing I would add is that you just see more people when the weather's nice. As much as all of us don't necessarily want to be sitting in an office on a nice day like today, everybody else feels that way too. And so you just see more people. And I think that's just a part of the weather being nice. And I think we also have to keep that in mind. It doesn't mean they don't have anywhere to go per se. It means it's a nice day and they're enjoying their city, just like you are likely enjoying your city as you walk down the street and see them.
Yeah, great perspectives. Thanks for that. So if a business owner or somebody is hearing all this good stuff you guys are offering and all these great resources, what's the easiest way for them to contact you, Kelly, or your organization?
So the York County Coalition on Homelessness does sit within the York County Planning Commission. So we are located downtown. We're at 28 East Market Street, but my staff is not always in the office. We are out and about. Probably no surprise there. So I typically don't recommend in person, but we are available via phone. You can always reach out, and I can include that information in a chat so that Hannah and the team at the Economic Alliance can share it. We have also, you know, a kind of a general coalition email. There's 3 of us at the coalition, so there's a few more than just me. And I can also share my own personal email and my cell phone. You're welcome to call. You're welcome to email. You might not get a response from me, but somebody from my team will absolutely get back to you. And don't hesitate to reach out. And actually, Robin and I have had the experience where we're in a business and they're like, "You're familiar," and we say who we are, and they're like, "Yes, I have questions," and they'll just ask us questions while we're there. You can do that as well. So if we're in your business or if we're walking down the street and you see us, you can stop us, ask questions that way too.
And Robin, how about you? How could a business
Sure,
or
same.
someone get a
I'm
hold of
gonna give, I'll give our hotline. We have a hotline. And so that gets our team, our street outreach team. So I can put everything in the chat too, if that works. Same with, you know, contacting me. I'll put my cell phone number in there as well. But we do have some of the downtown businesses and different organizations. Our team does stop in. We'll provide hotline cards. We provide sometimes like the weekend updates. So people know if somebody stops in on the weekend, they can, hey, here's a flyer. This is where you can find services this weekend. So, you know, that is always something that we can do as well.
Excellent. Yeah, so go ahead and drop them in the chat if you're able to, but also in our follow-up email with all of our registrants, we'll be sure to include your information as well. All right, so thank you both so much. We'll make sure to save time at the end for additional questions. Reminder to drop them in the Q&A or the chat for those watching so that we can address them at the end. So now we're going to switch over to Steve to talk about merchant and property owner responsibilities. All right, Steve, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for
All right.
having me.
Oh, yeah, for sure, Steve. Thanks for being here. So I'm going to start with some questions for you. We have some common misconceptions among merchants and property owners about whose responsibility is what in regards to maintaining the property. So if you could elaborate on what is a merchant responsibility and then what is the property owner responsibility?
Essentially, day-to-day maintenance of the property, that, you know, keeping the outside of the property clean, keeping, you know, the operations within the codes is what is the responsibility of the merchant. Building issues, you know, sinks broke, toilets clogged, are typically building owner responsibilities. That can vary also based on the lease that the merchant has with the owner of the property. I strongly recommend anybody that's going into a new business, make sure that they understand completely what responsibilities the owner of the property is placing back on them in the lease.
So is it typical for those specifics to be in a lease agreement, or are they more like a general in a lease?
I think they're typically more general, but there are some leases out there that place specific responsibilities on the operator of the business. Like if they want to reconfigure the space, if you know they want to change the lighting, the owner of the property puts that responsibility back on the business operator. From the property maintenance code standpoint, things like putting trash out at the appropriate times, you know, keeping the exterior of the property clean, those are tenant responsibilities, business operator responsibilities.
So when it comes to responsibilities like removing snow or the condition of the sidewalk or the tree wells condition or the trench drain covers, where does that fall?
Well, the snow removal again could be a part of the lease. From a very strict code standpoint, we're going to hold the building owner responsible for snow removal. the tree wells and things like that, we're gonna generally reach out to the business and ask them to take care of that. The rain covers are gonna be a property owner responsibility, and that's becoming quite an issue in the downtown area. Those covers are probably 100 years old or getting close to it, and they're in very bad shape. So that is a big concern that we have in the downtown area.
Yeah, definitely. So, back to the snow removal, I know we've had a very light winter, which is fantastic, but when it does come to, say, an owner being out of state or out of the area, and those items fall on the property owner, does it then bump to the business owner to take care of that?
Typically, those issues are not issues that are going to cause a building to be condemned as unsafe, unusable. So we are going to continue to hold the business, or I'm sorry, the property owner responsible. Out of state owners are very much a challenge. Our final last ditch effort for compliance is a summary citation, and they don't cross state lines. So most of the out of state owners are aware of that. And, if they're the type of owner that really isn't interested in upkeeping their property, then they're going to ignore those citations as well. So from an operational standpoint, it probably does fall to the business operator just because they want to make sure that their customers are safe and that their business is attractive. And then it probably becomes a civil matter between them and the owner of the building.
So when it comes to the sidewalks, how much of the space in front of a business is that business or the property owner responsible for?
The property owner is responsible for the sidewalk from the edge of the building out to the end of the curb, the outside edge of the curb. So sidewalks are property owner responsibility.
So say there's a wonky sidewalk, or the tree well looks a mess, or the trench drain cover is, 100 years old. What are some steps that the business owner or the property owner would be able to take to try to remedy those situations?
I would strongly urge the business operator to reach out directly to the property owner and let them know that, there is a unsafe condition in front of the building, that drain cover needs to be replaced, or the sidewalk needs repaired, and try to do that directly. However, if that's not possible, then they can reach out to us and we can reach out with an enforcement action to the building owner. But a lot of times, especially with commercial properties, the owners do tend to be more responsive and willing to step up and make the repairs that are needed, that are their responsibility.
Yeah. So first step would be to talk to the property owner if that's not the business owner themselves, and then go to you guys if necessary.
Absolutely. It's always a good idea to reach directly out to the owner to try and get resolution, because once we're brought in, then it tends to cause confrontation between the tenant and the owner. They gets a little sketchy that way, but certainly we're willing to come in and assist them with encouraging an owner to make repairs.
So can you tell us where to find resources that are available to the property owners to address any of these issues that we discussed?
The first thing I would say is on the city's website, the property maintenance code is posted. It's not a very big code. It's not terribly technical. So it is a good resource to have to understand what your responsibilities are as far as maintaining the property. That's a good resource for information. Again, a resource for the business owners, if they're having difficulties with their property owner, is to reach out to us, and we can collaborate to try and encourage that owner to assist them in getting things done that need to be done.
And does York City offer any resources, or are there any particular organizations that would be able to offer assistance with any of those issues?
As far as for commercial properties, there's really not a lot of assistance available. And that's probably a discussion that we need to have going forward, that maybe Downtown Inc. or one of the other organizations could partner with us to come up with some kind of resource, because it can be difficult, especially now post-COVID, trying to get a contractor even to come in and take care of something. And that's extremely difficult, and we try to be very understanding with that. Typically, when we issue an order for compliance, it's a 30-day time frame. But when the responsible party reaches out, we understand. We're going to work with them to make sure that things get corrected as quickly as possible, but understanding that it's oftentimes very, very difficult to get a contractor to come in, especially for things that we write up, because typically they tend to be a small job. And the small jobs get pushed out
Mhm.
farther because they're small, and they're not as profitable to the contractors.
Yeah, so just understanding that, you guys would be a little more understanding if there is just an effort made to do, for a reach out.
Absolutely. And another resource that we're hoping to make available very soon. We have several staff positions that need to be filled, and they're going to be filled rather quickly. The downtown area will have an inspector. They won't be assigned specifically just to the downtown area, but it'll be part of their district. And hopefully they'll get to know the business owners. The business owners will get to know them, and things can be more collaborative,
Mhm.
as opposed to us always coming out and saying, here's this letter, do this now.
Yes, relationship building, very important. And see, we have Downtown Inc. specifically has done some work with the trench drain cover. So I never
Yes.
knew what a trench drain cover was, and now it's just one of my favorite things. So, Steve, last question here for you. Given that much of the downtown York area is within the historic district, what's the best way to navigate improvements if you're in a historic structure?
Well, if you're in we call it the Harb district. If you're in the Harb district, it does make things slightly more complicated, sometimes a lot more complicated, depending on the nature of what needs to be done or what somebody wants to do. But with Harb, when somebody comes in to lift a permit, the first thing we're going to do is verify whether or not it's in the Harb district. And if it's in Harb, then there's an application process for that. Some of the more minor things can be a staff review. We try to do as many staff reviews as possible to keep things moving along. However, if it can't be a staff review, then it goes to the Historic Architectural Review Board and is reviewed at a meeting where the applicant comes to the meeting, they explain, and the board members vote on whether it's appropriate or not. Very oftentimes making suggestions. We have some very astute members of the Historic Architectural Review Board, and they're very much into assisting property owners or store owners to be able to do what it is they want to do while still complying with the very strict Harb requirements.
Mhm. Mhm. So say that a business owner, property owner, whatever it may be, wants to do something, paint the front of the building or add something to the stairs. Don't do it immediately, but how much time should they allow for a given project like that?
To be safe, I would allow at least a month. The nice thing is that the Historic Architectural Review Board meets twice a month. So as long as we get the application in a day or two before the Harb meeting, it'll get on that same board if the applicant's prepared to be at that meeting. So we do try to expedite it, but I would most definitely allow a month to make sure that there's no complications.
Yeah. All right, excellent, Steve, thank you. Anything else to add before we bring in our other two panelists, Steve?
No, we were finally successful in getting the trash day changed downtown so that merchants don't have to leave their trash out over the weekends. That's probably the biggest complaint we get in the downtown area is merchants that put their trash out and let it sit too long. That has declined greatly. I think the merchants are much more aware now. So certainly we want to be here as a resource for the businesses downtown. We're more than happy to answer questions and try to collaborate to make sure their downtown is beautiful and appealing to the eye.
Excellent. So what is the new trash day?
New trash days now are Tuesdays and Thursdays, I believe, downtown,
All right, excellent.
or Tuesdays and Fridays. I'm sorry.
Tuesdays and Fridays. Okay,
Tuesdays
little
and
wins.
Fridays, yes.
Awesome.
That way you don't have to leave it out the whole weekend.
Yeah. Great. All right, Steve. So let's welcome back Kelly and Robin. And Steve, you're going to hang on with us as well. And we have some questions that have been submitted during the discussion. Again, if anybody else has questions, please pop them in. Okay, so first one here is I have a bathroom that has a shower and I've considered allowing persons who are unhoused or even trail users to utilize the shower. It feels like there's potential to be able to provide a valuable resource, but also feels like it might be a little awkward for users, customers, whomever. So any suggestions on a structure that might allow the business owner to provide an option in a way that feels safe and comfortable for everyone?
I would say making sure you can attend to the bathroom with the shower. So making sure that whatever your staffing mechanism looks like, you have someone that can act almost like an attendant to make sure that their focus is making sure that things are moving forward and people are moving through that space within a relatively appropriate time frame. Depending on where in the business the shower is located, probably some buffer to allow someone exiting that restroom not to just be walking out to a table full of people or walking out to people, browsing product, giving it a little bit of a buffer on the outside of the bathroom would probably be really smart. And I think realistically, it's deciding what your parameters are for use of that bathroom. Maybe not even focused on who, but focused on how often, any time limitations in the space, what you are going to provide in that space as far as soaps and shampoos and things of that nature, and recognizing that opening up a shower area will probably increase your costs as far as potential plumbing issues in that bathroom space. I see Steve nodding.
Yeah.
Potential bathrooms in the, and so taking all of that into account when you offer that space. I think, if you're doing this as like a sticker on your window saying, some cute, I'm not good at marketing, but some cute little, hey, we have this available. Stop in and see someone at the cash register, at the front desk, at the bar, whatever it might be, and allowing them to have to come and ask and talk to you about parameters for use of it is probably a good recommendation too. But I think it's great. And as far as, we didn't mention this earlier, I didn't want to rattle off resources, but there are some shower options for folks that are unhoused. In York City, LifePath Christian Ministries, at both their men's location on Market Street as well as their women's location on Jefferson, do allow what they call community showers every afternoon. I think it's 1 p.m. to 3 p.m., but people can come in, even if they're not staying in the shelter, they can come in, they'll provide soaps, shampoos, and they'll allow them to use their shower spaces. So there is some place you can recommend if you're not the business owner who has a shower who's willing to open it up. But also keep that in mind. Their showers are open 1 to 3. So if you're opening your space, do you want to provide an option in the morning or whatever, different days? LifePath showers are Monday through Friday. Is your business open on the weekend? Do you want to provide it then? So thinking that way too, making sure you're filling a gap in time or day would probably be beneficial too.
Yeah, I agree. Keeping in mind that that's then going to increase the traffic of people that are going to come around.
Right.
So just knowing that ahead of time before you, I think looking at all the parameters and making those decisions, and towels and clean clothes and dirt stuff that's left, and looking at everything before a decision like that's made, I think is definitely important.
And I also think, you're not tied into this, right? Like,
Right.
you can come up with a strategy. You're welcome to talk to Robin and I about what it looks like. Probably will connect you to LifePath too, and they can talk to you about what a community shower resource looks like, barriers or challenges you might see. And you can start out. And if it doesn't work, you can make revisions. What it comes down to is being able to share those revisions with people that come back to use that shower space and say, hey, I know you've been here before. We've made some changes. Here's what they are. It comes back down to communicating expectations and communicating what is available and what is not in your space.
Steve, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I would just say that it would probably be very important to have a check-in and check-out process. With our drug problems that we were experiencing this day and age, you want to make sure that you know who's in and out, or so that you can follow up. And that's also to check the condition of your restroom as well, to clean up any messes that might be left behind, remove any syringes or needles or whatever that might be left behind. But because that's something you do have to be aware of. You want to be helpful. You want to make things better for the community, but you also then have to be wise about it and make sure that you're protecting your other customers as well.
So on that topic, many communities like Boston are implementing safe injection sites. So where drug users can use drugs in designated areas under supervision of trained staff without punishment. These reduce overdoses and connect individuals with support resources. So would such a program be available in New York City or considered? I'm not even sure who to ping that to, so.
Right.
I'll start. So these types of safe injection sites and activities fall under an umbrella that's typically referred to as harm reduction. So understanding that people are accepting unsafe kind of activities, but trying to make them as safe as possible while they're participating in those activities. Harm reduction is a very polarizing topic. People either feel nobody should be doing any of this stuff, so we're not going to encourage it, or people feel they're going to do it anyway, and so we're going to try to make them as safe as possible while they're doing it because they are part of our community. I think that polarizing aspect is what makes it really hard to provide programs like this. This would definitely not be Robin or I's kind of forte. This would be something that would definitely be handled, implemented in conjunction with the city by a drug and alcohol provider. And I know that there have been these discussions. We're part of the opioid collaborative in York County, and I know I've had these conversations there too. But I think it is a larger lift than a lot of people probably recognize. And I think Steve can probably add some of this too. But I think it's something to be considered. I think if there's a strong advocacy component to wanting to offer that type of location, reaching out to Drug and Alcohol Commission at the County of York, reaching out to the Opioid Collaborative. There are a host of others. Those are just a couple off the top of my head. And saying, have you looked at this? Never assume no one's done anything. So have you looked at this? Why or why not? What have you learned? And kind of going from there would be my recommendation.
Thanks, Kelly. Steve, did you want to add something? I didn't want to put you on the spot or take it away from you, but.
And that's a little bit outside of my scope. However, it would fall within the Department of Economic and Community Development with our Health Bureau. City of York is blessed to have its own Health Bureau. It's one of very few in the state. And I know they're a part of the Opioid Collaborative, but I think an interest in that would best be directed towards the Bureau of Health. And I agree, it's probably a very heavy lift in our community.
That's a good point. I neglected to mention the Bureau of Health. They're phenomenal. Agree.
Yeah, absolutely. So speaking of another heavy lift. Talk about public restrooms.
Oh, we could keep you
Duh.
on Zoom for
Public
a decade
restrooms.
around this, but
Yes,
Go ahead, Rob.
I
You go
just
first.
spent multiple days in Edinburgh, Scotland, and researched and photographed all their public restrooms. This is a conversation that has been taking place in and around York City now since
For
March,
years.
since the pandemic started in 2020, heavily. Only because of the lack of restrooms at that time. Kelly and I just met with the Health Bureau, the City Health Bureau, just a couple weeks ago, and had another round of conversation around that. A lot of different, not just Kelly and I, but others around the city, other Downtown Inc. and others have done a lot of research. I know more probably about public restrooms and have visited more across the East Coast of the United States than I ever imagined I would do.
That's true. That's very
And in a lot of communities that are similar to the size of York, but also do have shared between unhoused population and tourism and how that works. So I can tell you those conversations are taking place. Many of us are very dedicated to those conversations.
The only thing I'll add to that, I did see the question as it was posed, and I do want to address the comfort stations that are underneath the square. The original question did ask about those comfort stations, and so I think it is really important to understand that as we just talked about the physical limitations of folks and that our population is getting older. Imagine that we all get older all the time. I don't feel like reopening those comfort stations, and this is personal, is the answer to public restroom access in York City. They're very steep stairs. There's a lot of them. And it would be very inaccessible for a lot of people. I think if we can rally and approach a public restroom option in York City, it would need to be something far more accessible from a physical standpoint. By making it more accessible, I also think we have the opportunity to make it safer. I'm not from York, but I've been here long enough that I've actually been down there. And it is, you'd have to have attendance all the time because it is so hidden away underneath the square. So I don't think the answer necessarily is bringing those comfort stations back. I think the answer is looking for a way to incorporate public restroom access into the infrastructure of the city. That is how most cities do it. It is a building within the city. It is a standalone structure like a Portland Loo in the city, but designed and decorated in a way that is appealing to the eye. I think having something street level is really the way to approach this. We would love to have, I think the other piece of this is whose responsibility is it? And I think that's where a lot of our conversations around restrooms get hung up. I mentioned earlier, right now, it definitely feels like the responsibility of public restrooms falls to the merchants in York City that have restrooms. And I don't know that that is the best model for the merchants or for the public that's utilizing them, tourists, rail trail participants, people that are experiencing homelessness, people that are just downtown and outside of their particular neighborhood for the day. But I also think that in communities that have a strong public restroom component, that their downtown inks are involved, which ours is, absolutely sees the appeal of this, but also their city government is involved and understands that this is a resource, yet another resource to bring people into the York City community for purchasing power, and also just to be able to live and walk and enjoy the downtown and all the amenities that they have. So I think it's a matter of, it's no individual group's responsibility. It's likely a combination and finding a way for those different groups to work together on it.
Thanks, Kelly. Steve, do you have anything to add to that? I'm sure you love talking about the comfort stations, as everyone does.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, they were a crown jewel in downtown York in the day. However, the infrastructure down there is so outdated. It would be astronomical to even try and put them back in service. And then, of course, you have the accessibility issues. So, and of course, from the city government side of things, funding. How do you pay for that? How do you staff it? Because even a public restroom that's on street level would still need to be attended. With because we want to make sure that it's still appealing and clean and ready for our visitors. And I believe that that would probably be something that would help with visitors as well, because as you said, children, you have children, restrooms necessity. You get old like me, restrooms necessity. So, I think anything that we can do to make the downtown more comfortable for folks and more accessible would be wonderful. The big challenge there, and again, you said it, another heavy lift, is how that would be funded.
Yep, so definitely a continuing conversation that a lot of folks are working on, but great question, and always something to keep in mind. All right, let's do one more quick question here. I think, Steve, we might have touched on this, but when it comes to the street trees in front of the building, I think we need the tree wells. Who does that responsibility fall on? Whether it's like the maintenance of it and pulling weeds, or the tree is dead and we need a new tree. Who is that responsibility?
The street trees belong to the building owner. I know there's a lot of confusion over the years with street trees because the city had various programs where they planted trees. The original owner of the building at that time signed something that says they were responsible for that. But of course, as the property changes hands, that doesn't get relayed. But most definitely the trees are the responsibility of the owner of the property. I would say that the maintenance of the tree well itself would be the responsibility of the tenant.
Excellent, thanks, Steve. All right, so we'll wrap up with that again in our follow-up email to all of our registrants and attendees today. We can include contact information for you guys, your organizations, your departments, to better, create these relationships and communication among our merchants and you all. Thank you so much for joining us. Robin and Kelly and Steve, great conversation. We really appreciate your information sharing. So I hope everyone that attended enjoyed the information and found it helpful to you and your business. And before we close, I have just a few announcements. So there's still time to get your tickets for Downtown Inc.'s Sweetest Pint Tasting Tour. This is on Saturday. You can enjoy local craft beer paired with delicious plates at 7 locations throughout downtown. It's a really fun afternoon, fun walking tour, great way to see the city. And we're dropping links here in the chat. Thanks, JJ. So let us know what you're planning for June 1st, Friday, if you are a business owner in downtown York. Promotional information is due May 26th. There's a form we're dropping in the chat where you can just directly send us your information and we'll populate it to our promotions. So if you're unable to join us at last week's downtown update, the recording is available on our website. The program included a state of the downtown address, updates on downtown redevelopment projects, updates from the Yorktown Hotel, and a panel discussion focused on residential and commercial real estate in the city. So we appreciate all of our attendees for joining us today. Thank you to our panelists again. We hope you'll join us for our June Business Series, Bloom Business Series workshop on Wednesday, June 21st at 8:30 a.m. And we'll meet some small business owners who have taken advantage of training, services, funding offered by our Bloom Empowerment Center through the YCEA. All right, and thank you to our presenting sponsor, PNC, for making all of our business series free, accessible to our attendees. All right, everyone, have an excellent day. Thank you.